The brakes didn't just fail, they screamed like a dying animal before my SUV lurched toward the intersection of 5th and Main, nearly turning my Tuesday morning into a final headline. My heart was thumping against my ribs like a trapped bird, the kind of frantic rhythm that makes your ears ring and your palms turn into a slip and slide on the steering wheel. I was shaking, not just from the near miss with a silver minivan, but from the pure, unadulterated realization that Sterling Heights Motors had sold me a death trap. I sat there, hazards blinking in the morning fog, staring at the polished chrome logo on the steering wheel that promised reliability and luxury, while the smell of burning fluid seeped through the vents. This wasn't just a bad car, it was a betrayal in a shiny metallic coat. I remember walking into that dealership 3 weeks ago, feeling like I'd finally made it. I had my hard-earned savings, a decent credit score, and the naive hope that a reputable dealer wouldn't try to pull a fast one on a single woman looking for a safe ride. The salesman, a guy named Rick who wore too much cologne and a smile that felt like it was printed on cardstock, had assured me this SUV was pristine. He'd shown me a Carfax that looked cleaner than a Sunday schoolroom and talked about family values while he upsold me on a warranty that, as I found out an hour ago, apparently covered everything except the parts that actually make a car stop. I should have seen the red flags, the way he avoided eye contact when I asked about the brake pads, the slight shudder during the test drive that he dismissed as just the road being uneven, but I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. Now, as I waited for a tow truck on the side of a busy American highway, watching commuters zoom past me with their coffee and their functioning vehicles, that belief was replaced by a cold, hard knot of fury in my stomach. It's a specific kind of anger, isn't it? The kind that starts in your toes and works its way up until your jaw is so tight it aches. I looked at the sold sticker still stuck in the corner of the windshield and felt like the world's biggest sucker. But as the adrenaline started to fade, it left behind something much more dangerous. A plan. Rick and the manager, a greaseball named Mr. Henderson, thought they'd seen the last of me when I signed those papers. They thought I was just another clueless female they could bully with technical jargon and standard procedure excuses. If you've ever felt that pit in your stomach when you realize you've been scammed, or if you've ever been talked down to by someone who thought they were smarter than you, hit the like button and subscribe right now. I'm telling this story because I want you to know that you don't have to just take it. When Sterling Heights Motors handed me the keys to a lemon, they didn't realize they were handing me the fuse to blow up their entire operation. I spent years working in marketing and data analytics before I pivoted to my current career, and if there's one thing I know, it's how to dismantle a reputation from the inside out. This isn't just about a refund anymore. This is about a reckoning. You're going to want to hear every single detail of how I turned their pristine reputation into a cautionary tale that went viral across the entire state. The tow truck driver arrived 40 minutes later, a grizzled man named Vern, who took one look at my leaking undercarriage and whistled. "Man, they sold you this? This line is rusted through. Shouldn't have passed any inspection, let alone a dealership-certified one," he said, shaking his head. Hearing a professional confirm my fears was the spark that hit the gasoline. I didn't cry. I didn't vent to him. I just pulled out my phone and started recording. I recorded the leak. I recorded Vern's assessment. I recorded the odometer. Then I pulled up my original sales contract and filmed the section where it promised a multi-point safety inspection. I was building a file, and I was going to be meticulous. I had the tow truck drop the car off right in the middle of their VIP guest parking at the dealership. Not the service bay around back, but the prime real estate right in front of the floor-to-ceiling glass windows of the showroom. When the metal bed of the truck tilted and my broken SUV slid down with a metallic clump, the salesman inside stopped mid-pitch. I saw Rick peek through the blinds, his face dropping faster than my resale value. I hopped out of the cab, thanked Vern, and marched toward those glass doors with my shoulders back. I wasn't the sweet girl who'd bought the car 3 weeks ago. I was a woman who had spent the last hour researching the state's lemon laws and consumer protection statutes until I could recite them in my sleep. Mr. Henderson was waiting for me at the door, his hands in his pockets trying to look casual while sweating through his silk tie. "Ma'am, you can't park that there. It's a fire hazard," he started, his voice dripping with that condescending customer service tone that makes you want to scream. I didn't scream. I smiled. It was a sharp, thin smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Actually, Mr. Henderson, I think the fire hazard is the car you sold me that almost sent me into a semi-truck this morning. And since your top-tier service department is currently too busy to take my calls, I figured I'd bring the problem directly to you." A couple, probably in their 60s, was looking at a luxury sedan nearby. They paused, listening. I made sure to project my voice just enough. "We can discuss this in my office," Henderson hissed, gesturing toward the back. He was trying to hide the damage, to keep the vibe of the showroom intact. But the more he tried to hush me, the louder my internal sirens grew. I followed him, but I kept my phone out, recording the audio. In his office, the air smelled of stale coffee and desperation. He offered me a seat, which I declined. He offered me a discount on future labor, which I laughed at. Then he made the mistake of saying the words that sealed his fate. "Look, honey, cars are complicated machines. Things happen. You probably hit a pothole or something. There's no way to prove it was like that when you left." Honey. He called me honey. I leaned over his desk, looking him straight in the eye. "I have a video of a certified mechanic pointing out the rusted lines. I have the inspection report you signed saying they were perfect, and I have a very large following on LinkedIn and local community boards that would love to know how Sterling Heights Motors treats complicated situations." His face paled, but then he smirked, leaning back in his leather chair. "Good luck with that. Our legal team is on retainer, and we have an ironclad as-is clause in your contract. You're barking the wrong tree." He thought he'd won. He thought a piece of paper and a lawyer would protect him from the truth. As I walked out of that dealership, I didn't feel defeated. I felt electrified. He thought he was playing a game of contracts and fine print, but I was playing a game of public perception and digital footprints. I got into my Uber, opened my laptop, and began drafting the first post. I wasn't just going to sue them, I was going to make sure that no one in this city ever felt safe buying a car from them again. I had the data, I had the evidence, and I had the motivation. But as I hit refresh on the dealership's official Facebook page, I saw something I didn't expect. A comment from another woman posted just 10 minutes ago, claiming her transmission had blown on the highway in a car she'd bought from them yesterday. This wasn't just a lemon, this was a pattern, and Henderson had no idea that I'd just found my first witness. The submit button hovered under my cursor like a trigger. One click and the war would officially begin. I sat in my dimly lit living room, the glow of my laptop screen reflecting in my eyes, feeling like a ghost in my own life. My SUV, the thing I had sacrificed vacations and expensive dinners for, was currently sitting in a gravel lot, a 3-ton paperweight. But that woman's comment on the dealership's Facebook page, that was the lifeline I needed. Her name was Sarah, and her profile picture showed a tired-looking mom holding a toddler. She wasn't a disgruntled customer, she was a victim of a system designed to chew people up and spit them out. I reached out to her, my fingers flying across the keys, and within an hour we were on the phone. "They told me I must have been driving it too hard," Sarah sobbed into the receiver, her voice cracking with the kind of exhaustion only a mother with a broken car and a dwindling bank account knows. "I've had it for 48 hours. I can't get my kid to daycare, and Henderson told me if I didn't stop calling, he'd have his lawyer send me a cease and desist for harassment." My blood turned to ice. It was the same playbook. Isolate the victim, make them feel small, and use the threat of legal action to keep them quiet. But Sarah didn't know who she was talking to. I wasn't just another victim. I was the mistake Sterling Heights Motors was going to regret for the rest of their fiscal year. I spent the next 48 hours doing what I do best, digging. I didn't just look at reviews, I looked at the history of the business license. I looked at the mechanics who had quit in the last 6 months. I found a former employee, a young guy named Tyler, who had been fired for insubordination. When I met him at a local diner, he looked over his shoulder like he was sharing state secrets. "They make us spray paint over the rust," he whispered, poking at a cold plate of fries. The multi-point inspection is a joke. We have a stack of pre-signed forms. If a car looks shiny enough to sell, it goes on the lot. I tried to tell them about the brake lines on the silver SUV, your SUV, and Henderson told me to shut up and do my job or find a new one. If you've ever had a gut feeling that someone was lying to your face but you didn't have the proof to back it up, you need to hit that like button right now. We've all been there, the underdog fighting a giant that thinks it's untouchable. But here's the thing, giants have big footprints, and those footprints leave a trail. By subscribing to this channel, you're joining a community that stands up for the truth. I realized right then that I wasn't just fighting for my $25,000. I was fighting for Sarah, for Tyler, and for every person who had been intimidated into silence. I was about to take all this raw data and turn it into a digital storm that would make Henderson's legal team look like they were playing with crayons. Stick around, because what I discovered next in their public tax filings was the smoking gun I needed to take them down for good. Tyler gave me more than just stories. He gave me the names of 3 other mechanics who had left for the same reason. I spent the next week building a spreadsheet that looked like a forensic audit. I had dates, VIN numbers, and a growing list of near-miss accidents that had happened within a month of a car leaving that lot. My living room wall started to look like a detective's corkboard, covered in printouts, highlighted contracts, and photos of rusted undercarriages. I was obsessed. Every time I looked at the bruise on my shoulder from the seatbelt tensioner during my near accident, my resolve hardened. I wasn't just going to sue them in small claims court. I was going to trigger a state investigation. I reached out to the local news, the On Your Side segment that usually handled neighbor disputes and lost pets. At first, they were hesitant. Dealership stories are a dime a dozen, the producer told me over the phone. But then I sent over the spreadsheet. I sent the video of Vern, the tow truck driver. I sent the recorded audio of Henderson calling me honey and dismissing a safety failure. Silence followed for about 30 seconds before she said, "Can you be at the studio tomorrow at 10? The momentum was shifting. I could feel the air pressure changing, the way it does right before a massive thunderstorm rolls across the plains. But the dealership wasn't going to go down without a fight. On Wednesday morning, I walked out to my Uber only to find a man in a dark suit standing by the curb. He wasn't Rick, and he wasn't Henderson. He looked like the kind of person who is paid very well to make problems go away. "Ms. Sterling?" he asked, his voice as smooth as polished marble. "I represent the ownership group of Sterling Heights Motors. We've noticed your recent activity online. We'd like to offer you a settlement, the full price of the vehicle plus $10,000 for your inconvenience, provided you sign a non-disclosure agreement and delete all your posts." $10,000. That was a lot of money. It was enough to buy a brand new car cash. It was enough to make all this stress disappear. For a split second, I thought about Sarah. I thought about the thousands of others who would continue to buy death traps if I took the money and ran. If I signed that NDA, Henderson won. He'd just consider it the cost of doing business and keep on scamming the next woman who walked through those doors. I looked the man in the eyes, adjusted my bag, and said, "Tell Mr. Henderson he's going to need a lot more than 10 grand to buy my silence. In fact, tell him he should save that money for his bail." The man's expression didn't change, but I saw a flicker of something. Maybe respect, maybe annoyance in his gaze. "You're making a very expensive mistake," he warned. "We have resources you can't even imagine. By the time we're done with you, your reputation will be as trashed as that car." He turned and walked away, leaving me standing there in the humid morning air. It was a direct threat. They weren't just defending themselves anymore. They were coming for me personally. They were going to try to dig up dirt to make me look like a crazy or unstable customer. I went back inside and locked the door. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was the thrill of the hunt. I went to my computer and pulled up the dealership's Yelp page, Google business profile, and Instagram. I saw a flood of new 5-star reviews that looked incredibly fake, all posted within the last hour. "Great service. Rick is the best." They were trying to drown out the truth with a digital smokescreen. They thought they could outcalculate me on my own turf. They didn't realize that I had been documenting the bot patterns for the last 3 days. As I sat there, a notification popped up on my phone. It was a message from an anonymous account on Instagram. It contained a single attachment, a grainy photo of a document titled Internal Memo Asset Disposal. I clicked on it and my heart stopped. It was a list of cars, including mine, marked with a red X and a handwritten note that said, "Sell as is, do not repair, move fast." This wasn't just negligence, this was a conspiracy to commit fraud, and the person who sent it, they were still inside the building.
The notification light on my phone blinked like a rhythmic warning in the dark of my bedroom. When I opened that asset disposal memo, I didn't just see a list of cars, I saw a list of potential casualties. My VIN was right there, squeezed between a 2018 sedan and a 2019 pickup, all marked with that chilling red X. They knew the brakes were shot, they knew the frame was compromised, and they sold it to me anyway, calculating that the cost of a potential lawsuit was cheaper than the cost of a proper repair. It was cold, corporate psychopathy, and it was signed with the initials RH, Richard Henderson. But before I could even process the weight of that document, the smear campaign hit. I got a text from my sister, "Hey, what is this?" followed by a link to a local community forum. I clicked it and my stomach dropped. There was a post titled, "Watch out for this scammer," featuring a heavily edited photo of me from my own Facebook page. The post claimed I was a serial litigant who made a living by buying cars, sabotaging them, and then suing dealerships for easy payouts. They even had fabricated statements from fictional previous employers claiming I'd been fired for theft. They weren't just trying to win the legal battle, they were trying to delete my character from the community. I sat on the edge of my bed, the silence of the house pressing in on me. For a moment, the weight of it all felt like it was crushing my chest. It's one thing to fight for a refund, it's another to have your entire life's reputation dragged through the mud by a man who hides behind a silk tie and a mahogany desk. They wanted me to crumble. They wanted me to call that man in the dark suit and beg for that $10,000 just to make the lies stop. But they forgot one thing. I am a child of the digital age. I know that for every lie told online, there is a digital footprint that leads back to the liar. If you've ever had someone tell a bold-faced lie about you just to protect their own skin, you know the heat that's rising in my chest right now. Hit that like button if you've ever had to fight to clear your name. This is the moment where most people give up, and that's exactly what people like Henderson count on. But by subscribing, you're seeing exactly how I used their own weapons against them. I didn't get mad, I got technical. I was about to trace those anonymous posts directly back to the dealership's own IP address, and when I did, the scammer narrative wasn't going to be about me anymore. It was going to be about the criminal fraud happening at Sterling Heights Motors. You won't believe the trap I set for them next. I pulled an all-nighter, my coffee getting colder with every hour that passed. Using a few basic networking tools and the metadata from the images they posted, I confirmed what I already suspected. The scammer posts were being uploaded from a router registered to the dealership's guest Wi-Fi. They were so arrogant they didn't even bother to use a VPN. I took screenshots of everything, the timestamps, the IP logs, the original source files. I was no longer just a victim, I was a digital forensic investigator with a personal vendetta. But I needed more than just IP addresses. I needed the face of the person who sent me that memo. I replied to the anonymous Instagram account, "Who are you? Why are you helping me?" 2 hours later, a reply came, "I'm the one who has to clean up his messes. Meet me at the 24-hour diner on Oak Street, 3 a.m., come alone." It sounded like a scene from a bad thriller, but in the world of predatory car sales, the truth is often stranger than fiction. I grabbed my coat and my pepper spray and I headed out into the cool pre-dawn air. The diner was nearly empty, save for a tired waitress and a woman sitting in the far corner booth wearing a heavy hoodie and oversized glasses. It was Rick's assistant, Maya. I'd seen her briefly at the dealership, tucked away in a corner cubicle buried under stacks of paperwork. When I sat down, she didn't look up from her coffee. If Henderson finds out I'm here, he'll ruin me like he's trying to ruin you. But I couldn't watch another person almost die because he wants to hit his quarterly bonus. That memo, it's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a second set of books, hidden in a floor safe in his office. It tracks the actual repairs, the ones they bill the insurance for but never actually perform. My mind raced. Insurance fraud. That wasn't just a consumer protection issue, that was a felony. Maya explained that Henderson would ghost bill for new parts, keep the money, and tell the mechanics to patch and paint the old ones. It was a massive, multi-million-dollar scam that had been running for years. I have the codes to the office after hours. She slid a small USB drive across the table. But I can't be the one to go in. I have a kid. I can't go to jail. She stood up, her hands trembling, and disappeared into the night before I could even say thank you. I sat there, staring at the USB drive. This was it, the nuclear option. If I used this information, there was no going back. Sterling Heights Motors wouldn't just lose a lawsuit, they would cease to exist. But I was also terrified. Breaking and entering, even with a code, was a massive risk. I wasn't a spy, I was a woman who just wanted a car that didn't try to kill her. I drove back to the dealership, parking a block away. The building looked like a sleeping beast, the chrome of the cars on the lot glinting under the security lights. I looked at my phone. It was 4:15 a.m. The On Your Side news crew was expecting a follow-up interview in 5 hours. I could either show up with my spreadsheet and my scammer defense, or I could show up with the evidence of a massive criminal conspiracy. I thought about Sarah and her toddler. I thought about the silver minivan I almost hit. The fear started to recede, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I got out of the car, the USB drive heavy in my pocket, and walked toward the side entrance Maya had described. The keypad glowed blue in the shadows. My heart was thumping so loud I was sure the security cameras could hear it. I punched in the code 4821 and heard the muffled click of the electromagnetic lock releasing. I stepped inside the showroom. The smell of new car scent and floor wax was overwhelming. I moved toward Henderson's office, my flashlight cutting a narrow path through the darkness. Everything felt magnified, the ticking of a clock, the hum of the HVAC system, the sound of my own breath. I reached his door and turned the handle. It was unlocked. I made a beeline for the floor safe behind his desk, hidden under a tacky Persian rug. My hands were shaking as I entered the second code Maya had given me. Turn left to 15, right to 30, left to 5. The heavy metal door creaked open, revealing a stack of ledgers that smelled like old paper and corruption. I grabbed my phone to start photographing the pages, but as the flash went off, a voice boomed from the doorway, freezing the blood in my veins. I figured you wouldn't take the 10 grand, honey, but I didn't think you'd be stupid enough to commit a felony. I spun around. Henderson was standing there, silhouetted by the hallway lights, and he wasn't alone. Behind him stood the man in the dark suit, and he was holding a camera of his own.
The click of the camera shutter felt like a gunshot in the silent office. Henderson stepped into the room, his shadow stretching across the floor like a dark stain. He looked smug, his chest puffed out under a designer pajama top paired with slacks, the look of a man who had been tipped off and rushed from his bed to catch a thief. Breaking and entering, grand larceny of business records, trespassing. You really did the work for us, didn't you? He sneered, tossing a ring of keys onto his desk. The man in the dark suit didn't speak. He just kept the lens of his professional-grade camera trained on my face, documenting my guilt for the world to see. I felt a wave of nausea hit me. I was standing over an open safe, holding incriminating ledgers in a building I didn't own. In the eyes of the law, at this exact second, I was the criminal.
Henderson walked closer, the scent of expensive scotch and victory radiating off him. "You thought you were so smart with your spreadsheets and your little viral posts," he said, his voice dropping to a low, menacing growl. "But this is my city. I pay for the police galas. I play golf with the DA. You're just a girl with a broken car and a very long prison sentence ahead of her. Hand over the phone and the USB, and maybe I'll tell the cops you were just confused when they get here." If you've ever felt the walls closing in on you, or if you've ever been in a situation where the bad guy seems to have every single card in his hand, hit that like button right now. This is the moment where I should have folded. My heart was screaming at me to run, to cry, to beg for mercy. But as I looked at Henderson's arrogant smirk, I remembered the asset disposal memo. I remembered Sarah's tears. And most importantly, I remembered that I'm not just a victim. I'm a woman who knows exactly how technology works. By subscribing, you're about to see the greatest Uno reverse card in the history of consumer revenge. Henderson thought he was catching me in a trap, but he failed to realize that I had invited the entire world to watch the capture in real time. You're going to love what happened when I reached into my pocket for my phone. I didn't hand him the phone. Instead, I tapped the screen and turned it around so he could see it. "Actually, Richard, you should probably say hi to the 3,000 people currently watching this on Facebook Live," I said, my voice steadying as I saw the blood drain from his face. "And you might want to wave to the On Your Side producer who's been recording the audio feed since I stepped through the side door. You see, I knew Maya was a plant. I knew the code was too easy. I knew you'd be waiting." The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. The man in the suit lowered his camera, looking to Henderson for direction. The trap had flipped. Henderson's smugness evaporated, replaced with a frantic, darting look in his eyes. He looked at my phone, then at the open safe, then back at me. You can't do that. That's entrapment. That's illegal recording." I laughed, and for the first time in weeks, it was a genuine cold laugh. In a one-party consent state, during the commission of a crime, like, say, insurance fraud and selling lethal vehicles, it's perfectly legal evidence. And since you just admitted on camera that you pay the DA and the police, I think the federal investigators are going to have a field day with this one. I stepped around the desk, keeping the phone pointed at him. The ledgers in this safe, I've already photographed the pages detailing the ghost billing. The USB drive, it contains the original factory safety alerts you ignored. And the scammer campaign you ran against me, the IP logs link it directly to your desk. You didn't just sell me a lemon, Richard. You sold your entire legacy for a few quarterly bonuses. Henderson lunged for the phone, his face twisted in a mask of rage, but the man in the suit stepped in front of him and held him back. "Stop it, Rick," the suit said, his voice cold. "It's over. Look outside." In the distance, the faint, rhythmic wail of sirens began to grow. Not just one or two, but a chorus of them. Blue and red lights began to dance against the showroom's glass windows, reflecting off the hoods of the overpriced cars that were built on lies. I hadn't just called the news, I had called the state attorney general's office hours ago, providing them with the digital evidence I'd gathered. They had been waiting for the signal the moment Henderson admitted to his connections on a live feed. Henderson sank into his leather chair, the very one he'd used to call me honey and dismiss my life as a pothole issue. He looked small, he looked old. The alpha dealer of Sterling Heights was nothing more than a cornered rat in a very expensive cage. I walked toward the door, my heels clicking on the tile with a sound of finality. As I passed the man in the suit, he stepped aside, his eyes downcast. He knew a sinking ship when he saw one. I walked out of the showroom just as the first 3 cruisers pulled into the lot, tires crunching on the gravel.
I stood on the sidewalk, the cold morning air filling my lungs, feeling the weight of the last 3 weeks finally lift. But as the officers rushed past me toward the office, one of them stopped. "Miss Sterling?" he asked. I nodded. "We're going to need you to come down to the station to give a formal statement. But first," he pointed toward the street. A car pulled up behind the police line, a beat-up, rusty old sedan. Sarah stepped out, her eyes wide as she took in the scene of the dealership surrounded by law enforcement. She looked at me, then at the flashing lights, and a slow, tearful smile spread across her face. We didn't even have to speak. The look of pure, unvetted justice on her face was worth more than any $10,000 settlement. However, as I watched the officers lead Henderson handcuffed out the front doors, my phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text from an unknown number. It wasn't Maya, and it wasn't the news. It was a single image, a photo of my house, taken from the street with a caption that read, "You think a few cops can stop what's coming for you. You haven't met the owners yet." My heart stopped. Henderson was just the manager. Sterling Heights Motors was owned by a massive multi-state conglomerate with deep pockets and even deeper shadows. I had won the battle, but the war had just leveled up. Part 5. The Final Reckoning. The chill that ran down my spine at the sight of that photo, my front porch, my flower pots, my sanctuary, was unlike any fear I'd felt before. It was a cold, clinical threat. Henderson was a cockroach, but the conglomerate behind him, Vanguard Auto Group, was the hive. They had billions in assets, a fleet of lobbyists, and apparently a team of fixers who didn't mind stalking a woman in the dead of night. I stood there on the sidewalk, the blue and red police lights strobe lighting the neighborhood, and I realized that my victory was a glass house. They expected me to go into witness protection, to get scared, to delete the evidence and vanish. They didn't realize that when you try to take a woman's life with a faulty car, you've already taken the only thing she had left to lose. I didn't go home. If they had a photo of my house, they were waiting for me there. Instead, I drove straight to the one place they wouldn't expect, the On Your Side news station. I walked into the lobby at 5:30 a.m., smelling like adrenaline and cheap diner coffee, and demanded to see the lead investigative reporter, Diane Vance. When she saw me, her eyes went wide. She'd seen the Facebook livestream. Everyone had. "They're threatening me, Diane," I said, slamming my phone onto her desk. "And if anything happens to me, I want the world to know exactly who did it." If you've ever reached a point where you were so tired of being afraid that you just became dangerous, you need to hit that like button right now. This is the moment where the average consumer becomes a legend. They tried to intimidate me into a corner, but all they did was give me a reason to burn the whole forest down. By subscribing to this channel, you're supporting the kind of courage it takes to look a billion-dollar monster in the eye and say, "Not today." I spent the next 6 hours in a high-security editing bay, connecting the dots between Vanguard Auto Group and a string of unexplained accidents across 3 different states. What we found in the SEC filings and the offshore accounts would do more than just close one dealership. It was going to trigger a national recall that would cost them everything. Stick with me for the final 10 minutes of this journey, because the way I delivered the final blow was pure poetic justice. Diane and her team worked like a well-oiled machine. We weren't just looking at Sterling Heights Motors anymore. We were looking at the Vanguard protocol. We discovered that this conglomerate had a specific algorithm for high-risk inventory. Essentially, they bought totaled cars from auctions, did cosmetic-only repairs, and distributed them to dealerships in states with the weakest lemon laws. My SUV wasn't a mistake. It was a line item in a spreadsheet designed to maximize profit at the cost of human lives. As the sun began to climb over the city, Diane looked at me. "We have enough for a special report," she said, "but the owners, the Vanguard board, they'll bury this in appeals for a decade, unless we hit them where it hurts, their stock price." We knew that at 9:30 a.m. the New York Stock Exchange would open. Vanguard was preparing for a massive public offering of their new electric vehicle wing. If we dropped the evidence of systemic safety fraud and the stalking of a whistleblower 30 minutes before the opening bell, the billionaire owners would watch their net worth evaporate in real time. I sat in the makeup chair, my hands finally still. I wasn't the shaking girl on the side of the highway anymore. I was a weapon. At 8:59 a.m., we went live, not just locally, but through the network's national affiliate. I sat across from Diane, the cameras red and humming. I showed the asset disposal memo. I showed the photo of my house they sent to intimidate me. And then I played the recording of Henderson admitting that the owners had a system for making people go away. My name is Elena Sterling, I told the camera, looking straight into the lens, straight into the eyes of whatever executive was watching from a penthouse in Manhattan. You tried to kill me with a car, and then you tried to kill my spirit with a threat, but I'm still here, and as of 5 minutes ago, the Department of Justice has been handed the keys to your entire operation. The reaction was instantaneous. My phone began to melt with notifications. Social media exploded with the hashtag #TheVanguardLemon. By 10 a.m., Vanguard stock was in a freefall, losing 40% of its value in a single hour. By noon, the FBI had raided 3 other dealerships owned by the group. The owners who sent that photo of my house were suddenly very busy talking to their own criminal defense attorneys. They thought I was a fly they could swat. They didn't realize that I was the spark in a powder keg. 2 months later, I stood in front of the remains of Sterling Heights Motors. The VIP guest parking was empty. The glass windows were boarded up, covered and seized by the state. Henderson was awaiting trial on multiple counts of fraud and racketeering. Vanguard Auto Group had filed for bankruptcy, their assets being liquidated to pay out a massive class action settlement for Sarah, Tyler, and hundreds of other victims I'd never even met. I had a new car, a modest, reliable sedan from a manufacturer with a spotless safety record, paid for by the settlement. But more than the car, I had my name back. The smear campaign had been debunked so thoroughly that I'd actually been offered a job in corporate ethics for a major tech firm. As I turned to walk away from the ghost of the dealership that almost took my life, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah. "We just got the check, Elena. My son is safe. I don't know how to thank you." I didn't need a thank you. I looked up at the empty sign where the reliability and luxury logo used to hang. I realized that revenge isn't just about getting even. It's about making sure the person who hurt you can never hurt anyone else again. I got into my car, buckled my seatbelt, and tested the brakes. They were firm. They were silent. I drove away into the sunset, the rearview mirror showing nothing but a crumbling empire in the dust. I was no longer a victim. I was the woman who took down a titan one spreadsheet at a time. And as for the owners who sent that photo, last I heard they were trading their silk ties for orange jumpsuits. Justice, it turns out, is the best luxury of all.